Well, good evening, everybody. Good afternoon, good morning, and welcome to our very first lockdown lecture of the new year. On behalf of Harif, we'd like to welcome you all from wherever you may be. My name is Lynn Julius, and Lawrence here, our technical expert, will be assisting. Harif, for those who don't know us, is the UK Association of Jews from the Middle East and North Africa, and we aim to raise awareness of the history and culture of Jews of this region. We are a small band of volunteers. We've been running these lockdown lectures since the start of the pandemic, and we've done over 60 of them. And we thank our regulars, our faithful followers, and we also welcome those who are new to us. This event is being live streamed on the Harif Facebook page, where you can also ask questions, and it's also being recorded, and the video will be uploaded to the Harif YouTube channel and accessible on our website. And the address for that is www.harif.org. Please do also check out our sister website, Point of No Return, which you can access by just typing in Point of No Return blog, and that keeps you up to date with the news. If you have any questions to our speaker, or any pertinent comments, please do put them in the chat. There's a button at the bottom of your screen. So on to tonight's subject. The 8,000 or so Jews still living in Iran give the impression of being content and protected by the regime. But how truthful is this picture? How happy are Jews in Iran? How does the Iranian regime use the local Jews to improve its image? And to what extent does the community suffer from antisemitism? How is it impacted by the regime's continuous efforts to deny the Holocaust? So we are delighted to welcome tonight an expert in this field. In fact, to welcome back Karmel Melamed, because he already gave us a talk in 2020. Karmel is an award-winning, internationally published Iranian American journalist based in Southern California. And I have to say he is a passionate activist on behalf of the community of Jews from Iran. And we are greatly indebted to the work he does to raise awareness of their present plight and their past history. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Karmel, and we will just be sharing his screen. Our screen, thank you. Over to you, Karmel. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Lynn. It's a pleasure to join you, and thank you to Harif for allowing me to speak to your audience and to your members. We're going to be chatting today about the Iranian regime's manipulation of the Jews to benefit the regime's poor image in the media, and then also the reality of what is the anti-Semitic situation in Iran today. What's truly going on behind the scenes that many may not be seeing. For the past 22 years, I've been reporting on the situation of Jews in Iran and anti-Semitism in Iran. So I've got a pretty good idea of what's happening, and the image of what the regime's projecting doesn't match up with what's going on in the ground. So let's take a look at that. Next slide, please. So the biggest question that I always get is, how many Jews still live in Iran today? There are estimates of between 5,000 to 8,000. The regime likes to inflate that number to anywhere between 20 and 30,000. They've been using that number for the past 40 years. And it's just simply ludicrous because we're seeing Jews, Iranian Jews leaving Iran every year. They trickle out. They end up in Southern California, New York, Israel, Europe. I meet many of them during the course of the year. So that 20 to 30,000 number is really ridiculous. And also, if we take a look at some of the synagogues, religious sites in the various Iranian cities, they're empty. So that number is really inflated. The 5,000 to 8,000 number is something that I've been able to gather based on my information from those that are living in Iran and also the Iranian Jewish community's leaders in the US. Again, it's an estimate. There's never really been a real census of how many Jews are left. But every year, hundreds of Jews leave Iran quietly. Obviously, it's an embarrassment for the regime to come out and admit that the number of Jews has declined in their country. They're always trying to project this image of being lovers of Jews, benevolent to the Jews, and making Iran a hospitable situation, hospitable place for the Jews. So they will not admit to the real number of Jews. They'll use their inflated numbers. I would say that there are 4 primary groups of Jews that still live in Iran. You have those that are very wealthy, very affluent, very well off. They have properties, businesses. They live a very good life financially, and they frankly think that they can outlive the regime. They can bribe their way out of any troubles or difficulties. So, you know, they've stayed in Iran. There's also a category of crypto Jews. These are, I would call them modern day Marranos living in Iran, outwardly to their neighbors, to their co-workers, to their friends. They do not proclaim their Jewish religion. They may practice Judaism at home. They don't go to synagogue. They may even be outwardly Muslim, but not practicing Islam. And you could call those, again, crypto Jews. They're state Jewish, but really behind closed doors at home. And again, they're rolling the dice. They think that not a problem. They can outlive the regime. They're not getting involved politically, so they've remained. There's another category are the Jews that are really not doing well financially. And their thing is, look, we are not well off. We don't have much money. If we would leave, go to Israel or the US or Europe, our financial situation wouldn't be any better. At least Iran is a place that we know, we're familiar, we can get help through neighbors, through friends, through donations. And again, they're rolling the dice, they've remained. And the last category is really the elderly and the older folks that are sick. Many of them have remained in Iran because of nostalgia. They're not doing well health-wise. They think it's really that it won't make a difference to them if they leave the country, and they're really used to life there. They've kind of tried to stay under the radar, and again, they're rolling the dice as well and choosing to stay in the country. And these are the 4 primary major groups of Jews that are still living in Iran today. Next slide. It's important to know who are the Jewish leaders of Iran to be able to understand how the regime manipulates them for their own media propaganda purposes. Starting off in your top left-hand corner is Parviz Yeshaya. He is a gentleman that's been involved with the Jewish community leadership-wise, really at the start of the Iranian Revolution. Many of the leaders and activists of the Jewish community fled Iran for persecution reasons, fear of arrest. He was one of the ones that believed in the revolution, believed in Khomeini's claims that all Iranians would be treated equal. And he's really been one of those voices that really outwardly supports the regime and really believes in the regime and its government, so to say. Over the years, he's kind of taken a back seat because he's getting older in age, but every once in a while, the Iranian state-run media will interview him. He will speak out from time to time. Directly below him is another Jewish leader, the chief rabbi of Iran. He's a fairly young man to be a chief rabbi. He's 35-year-old Yehuda Gerami. Rabbi Gerami is a US-trained Orthodox rabbi, fluent in Hebrew, fluent in English. He actually visited the United States several months ago to talk about the Jewish community still living in Iran, and he happened to pass on some quote-unquote positive information about how the regime was supposedly treating the Jews very well. He's another personality that the Iranian media, state-run media, parade out and have him praise the regime. In the center is another gentleman, Siamak Morasedek. He is, I'm not 100% sure if he still is or not. I believe he still is, but the only Jewish member of the Iranian regime's parliament. And he's another gentleman that has been very, very active in the Iranian media and also in the Western media in Europe and the US to sing the praises of the regime. Whether the US media outlets Western media outlets have gone to Iran, he's usually the face of the community, and he's always, singing their praises and saying the Jews are treated well. He has been very, very vocal in supporting the regime's desire for nuclear energy. Really a very, very vehement supporter of the regime in the media, Iranian media and Western media. And to the right is the head of the Iranian Jewish community, Tehran. It's called the Tehran Central Committee. And this gentleman's name is Homayun Samea Najaf Abadi. And again, he's another gentleman that appears before the Western media, Iranian media, really trying to toe the line and sing the praises of the regime. Next slide. So we ask ourselves, why are these Jewish leaders in Iran singing the praises of the regime? And I think it really falls under three major categories. They're basically being manipulated. The Jews of Iran are being manipulated by the Iranian intelligence apparatus to advance the regime's PR image. They have a very negative PR image in the West about being anti-Semitic, Holocaust deniers, and as a result, the Iranian regime, the Mullah regime, has taken a book. They've ripped out a book straight out of the Nazi propaganda and I should say the former Soviet propaganda books. and paraded out the Jews of Iran for their own benefit. And it really falls under three categories. The first one is really coercion. The regime's intelligence ministry, security forces basically have told the Jews of Iran and their leadership, if you don't sing our praises, if you don't toe the line and say that we are benevolent and we treat the Jews well, you will face serious consequences. The other category is payoffs. Again, there's no direct evidence, but by the gestures, by the words that a lot of these Jewish leaders in Iran pronounce in support of the regime, it's kind of prevalent. You get the idea that maybe they've been paid off. And lastly, it's propaganda. They are paraded out at every opportunity through all the media outlets that are Persian language and also English language by the regime to praise the regime at every opportunity, at every angle, and really toe the line and do damage control for the regime whenever necessary. Next slide. So by coercion, as I was saying, the Iranian regime's thugs, their leadership has basically gone out to the Jewish community and their leaders and said, look, you gotta go on camera, you gotta go in front of the media, our media, foreign media, and tell them that you're being treated well, or else. I've heard this directly from many of the people that live in Iran, many of the Jews that live in Iran, many of the Jews that travel between Iran and the US. They've come to me and said, look, Karmel, these people are afraid. They don't want to go to jail. They don't want to be imprisoned, tortured, executed. So they're saying whatever their captors, whatever the regime's telling them to say. So they're really under duress. What they say has very little credibility. And this is actually a great example of that. This is a group of Iranian rabbis about 2 years ago, after the strike that killed Soleimani. They went directly to Soleimani's family's home and they paid condolences to his family. They condemned Israel, they condemned the US, they called it a terrorist act, and it was all presented in front of the media. Many folks many Jews in Iran said, look, this was done directly to protect the Jewish community from any hostilities within Iran, and also to keep the regime's thugs and authorities happy. Again, this is Rabbi Garami that I mentioned to you. They will not say this. They will not say that they are facing duress and coercion, but it's pretty evident from the expressions on their faces. Next slide. So I call this, as I mentioned, I call this category payoffs. And based on the rhetoric and the behavior of some of these Iranian Jewish leaders in the Western media, in front of Western cameras that come to Iran, it makes me believe that they've been paid off in some way, or even taken care of, been given preferential treatment by the regime. And I think the number one example is with the member of the parliament, Morris Sedek. He actually appeared on CNN several years ago, singing the praises of the regime, condemning Israel, condemning Netanyahu, just really, really powerfully standing behind the regime and claiming that the Jews are living a fantastic life. The Ayatollah leaders are very benevolent and kind and considerate. there was even a reporter that asked him, and a U.S. reporter, I believe, that asked him, what do you say to your family members that are living outside of the country that are Jewish? And he said, you know what? I told my wife, I love Iran. And if you don't love Iran, you can go, you can leave the country. And she left, she went to New York. So when someone says something like that, it makes me believe, it makes me feel like, you know what? He's probably been taken care of. He's probably gotten some kickbacks. He's probably getting some preferential treatment. That's why he's so vehemently and passionately supportive of the regime. Next slide. The last category is really propaganda, which is the whole show, the whole kit and caboodle. At every opportunity, the Iranian regime loves to parade out Iran's Jews, whether it's within their own English language media, their Persian language media, in front of Western media. They love to bring out the Jews and say, look at these Jews of Iran, we're treating them well. They don't need security guards outside of their synagogues. They're not being harassed. They're flourishing. Look, we're honoring the Iranian Jewish soldiers that were killed in the Iran-Iraq war. Every opportunity they have, they parade out the Jews, very, very similar to what the Nazis did during World War II. There was a show concentration camp by the name of Theresienstadt in Czechoslovakia at the time, and the Nazis turned that into their showpiece camp. And they invited in the Red Cross. They even had a film where they videoed these Jews in the camp in Theresienstadt, having food and living very comfortably and playing sports. The Iranian regime has done the exact same thing with the Jews in Iran to really improve their image. And it's manipulation, it's propaganda. It's really quite the opposite. In the center, you have a snapshot of, unfortunately, an American Jewish publication by the name of Ami magazine. And I wrote an op-ed piece really blasting them for featuring Rabbi Garami. I have no issue with Rabbi Garami. I have the utmost respect for him. I know he's doing what he has to do to keep the Jewish community in Iran safe. But for this American Jewish publication to put him on the cover and claim that the Jews of Iran are thriving is irresponsible. It's inaccurate. It's wrong. And it needs to be called out. The Jews of Iran are living under duress. They are not safe. And unfortunately, many Americans, Europeans, Westerners don't realize that. They fall for this media propaganda. Now, you ask me, how do I know? How do I know that they are truly speaking from the heart and not towing the line? And it's pretty obvious to me, because as a reporter, as an Iranian and a Jewish reporter, if I wanted to go to Iran, I would need to submit my passport, all my information. The Iranian intelligence regime would have to, the regime's intelligence apparatus would have to approve my media credentials before even issuing me a visa. And even if I were issued a visa, if I went to Iran, they would have to have me walk around with one of their quote unquote escorts, their thugs, to monitor what I'm hearing, what the Jews are saying in Iran to me, what footage I'm taking, what footage I'm displaying. So it's really a game. It's really a manipulation. And You have, US media outlets like PBS and CBS and CNN going to Iran and interviewing these Jews. What they don't tell you is there are Iranian intelligence ministry thugs watching over these Jews while they're being interviewed by the Western media. And these Jews are terrified. They cannot be saying what they really believe in front of the Western media, because they know they're going to be facing negative repercussions by the regime. Next slide. Here we have another example of how the regime manipulates the Jews. Here's a group of Jews several years ago that were paraded out by the regime. They're holding up a banner. I don't know if you could see that. That gentleman's body is blocking it, but they're basically been paraded out by the regime to endorse the regime's desire to have nuclear energy and nuclear facilities. They've put the language out on that banner in Hebrew, in English, and in Persian language. Again, this is another example of Jews being manipulated, paraded out just for the benefit of the regime. Next slide. So what is the reality? What is the reality of the situation of the Jews in Iran? And the reality is Jew hatred, and I'm not going to use the word anti-Semitism because it's pure Jew hatred, in my opinion. Jew hatred is alive and well in Iran, and it's alive and well based on these various spheres in the country. You have Jew hatred in the regime's major institutions. You have anti-Jewish incidents, activities in the country, attacks on synagogues and individual Jews. You have these horrifically biased anti-Jewish and then anti-non-Muslim Sharia laws in the country. They really put Jews and non-Muslims, Zoroastrians, Christians, at a disadvantage. You also have anti-Jewish books. There's anti-Jewish rhetoric and activity on Iranian language media and television. You also have an incitement of Jew hatred by public figures, by ayatollahs, by religious figures, by leaders in the regime. And then lastly, the Holocaust denial. That is the biggest example of anti-Semitism, vile, disgusting Jew hatred that you see in the rest of the Arab world, but the Iranian regime just takes it to a whole other level with cartoon competitions and parading out these Holocaust deniers from Europe and the US on their media outlets, and just really pushing this Holocaust denial narrative. If that's not anti-Jewish activity, frankly, I don't know what is. It's really horrendous. And so let's dive into examples of each one of these. Next slide, please. So Jew hatred in the national Iranian institutions. There are tons of regime organizations that propagate and advance hatred of the Jews. I've chosen 3 of the major organizations that are really vehemently anti-Jewish. They parade out and put out really disgusting, vile, anti-Jewish conspiracy theories and comments. Their leaders make really vile anti-Jewish comments. Before I get into each one of these particular organizations, I think it's important to lay out a very important idea. If there are many of those that follow the regime's rhetoric, the rhetoric of the regime's supreme leader and their other leaders, they like to say they are anti-Israel. They say, we are anti-Zionists, we are anti-Israel, we are not anti-Jewish. We respect the Jews of Iran, we respect the Jews of the world, and we are only against Israel, we are only against the Zionists. But this is just rhetoric. In reality, and every once in a while, their real true face, the facade appears, and the masks fall off, and the anti-Jewish rhetoric and anti-Jewish comments and belief come out. And they come out through many of these national institutions. The first one is perhaps one of the most popular is the Imam Khomeini Institute. It was founded in 1991 by the gentleman that's appearing on the right. This is the late Ayatollah Mesbah Yazdi. Yazdi passed away recently, in recent years, but since the beginning of the regime, he had been one of the foremost anti-Jewish clerics in Iran. He really didn't hide his Jew hatred behind, Israel and the Zionists. He set up this organization to put out anti-Jewish books, anti-Jewish articles in Persian language and also in other languages to really pound in that anti-Jewish belief of the regime into younger people, into academia, into all spheres of life, according to his radical Islamic views. This organization, on many occasions, has named Jews in Judaism as deviants and a deviant religion. Jews are claim Jews are a greedy nation. They have this magazine called Marafat, and in that Marafat magazine, they call Jews warmongering, conspiracy theories of Jews controlling the world media and world finance. Just really, really outrageous anti-Jewish claims and conspiracy theories. The next organization that's pretty prominent is the Islamic Development Organization. It was actually founded by Khomeini, the regime's leader and founder, in 1982. Again, they spread articles about Jews using music and the media and wine to corrupt the world and to corrupt Muslims. Jews are parasites, they're racists, they're vengeful, they're jealous. Again, it's another one of these national institutions that likes to hammer home the anti-Jewish, their anti-Jewish beliefs. They're really trying to create this anti-Jewish hatred among people, and they're doing it through this academic setting. The last major organization that's been very, very active in passing along anti-Jewish conspiracy theories and beliefs it's called the Political Studies and Research Institute. It's actually a organization that falls under the umbrella of the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. And it was founded in the 1990s by a gentleman by the name of Abdullah Shabazi. And Shabazi was an academic, and he was told by the regime's leadership to put forth their anti-Jewish and anti-Israel beliefs in academic papers, books, articles, so they could share that with the world and really use academia to advance the regime's political ideologies and their political beliefs. Again, it's an organization that puts out these horrific Jewish conspiracy theories in their books, in their articles. Shabazi actually put out a 5-volume book called the Jewish and Parsi plutocrats, a British imperialism and Iran. That book was named the 2006 Book of the Year by the Iranian regime. It received an award from the former Iranian Holocaust denier President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. It's just really horrendous. Last week, I actually had an article about Shahbazi being allowed into the US, which is a real travesty. The Biden administration, for reasons that I still don't understand, allowed this Holocaust denier and really vehement anti-Jewish clown into the US. And he still hasn't disavowed his anti-Jewish and Holocaust denial beliefs and comments. They're still available online on his website in Persian language. Again, he was the founder of this Political Studies and Research Institute. And even though he's not in Iran, the organization still continues, still publishes these outrageous Jewish conspiracy books, Holocaust denial books. Next slide, please. So we've got many incidences of attacks on Jews and Jewish sites. What I always like to tell those folks that claim that the Jews live in peace, they live in relative quiet, they're not harassed by the regime. What I like to tell them is, oh yeah, well, could you please explain all these attacks on the Jews and Jewish sites in Iran in recent years? Perhaps one of the most prominent was in May of 2020. The synagogue that was adjacent to the tomb of Esther and Mordechai in the city of Hamadan was firebombed. By whom, we don't know. The regime has never investigated it. Thank God the tombs weren't destroyed. As you can see through these photos that the regime put out, the synagogue only had a little bit of fire damage and smoke damage. But again, why wasn't this incident reported on by the regime? Why wasn't it ever investigated? Why wasn't anyone ever arrested? Why weren't there any convictions? Why, if the regime supports the Jews and protects the Jews, why wasn't anything done to provide security for that site? Why didn't any of the regime's quote unquote leaders that love the Jews condemn the attack in the Iranian media or outside? It is preposterous. It is preposterous that they said nothing. We heard crickets, and that's because they hate Jews. And Iran is not a safe place for Jews. And it's pretty evident. There's a lot of talk, there's a lot of propaganda, but the actions speak volumes. Next slide. Some of the other attacks in recent years in the Jewish community in Iran, February of 2019, you had 3 antique Torahs stolen out of the 125-year-old Ezra Yarub synagogue inside of Tehran's Jewish ghetto. These Torahs were more than 100 years old in broad daylight. 3 Torahs stolen by unknown robbers. Again, where was the condemnation from the regime? Where were the stories? Where was the investigation by the regime? You didn't hear any of it. In fact, you didn't hear any of it in the Western media either. I was the only one that wrote about it for Jewish publications because I'm in touch with the Jews in Iran, and I've spoken with many of the folks, and it was outrageous. It was horrendous. Why didn't the regime condemn this? Why weren't there any investigations? Why wasn't anyone arrested? Why wasn't there any convictions? Another, attack on the Jews in Iran, and the regime was silent. Why were they silent? Because they don't care about the Jews. Iran is not a safe place for the Jews. Again, 2017, 2 synagogues in the city of Shiraz were vandalized. Torah scrolls were ripped up. Tzedakah boxes were banged up. Money was stolen out of the tzedakah boxes. Prayer books were ripped off. No investigation, no arrests, no mention in the Iranian language media. Barely covered in the Western media, except for myself and perhaps some other Jewish media personalities. Another horrific attack was in 2012. An Iranian Jewish woman, 57-year-old, by the name of Tuba Nadarian, she was ritually slaughtered inside of her home in the Jewish ghetto of Esfahan. We don't know who, but these assailants basically broke into her home, murdered her, bludgeoned her body, cut up her body parts, and left her in her home. Again, the Jewish community in Iran said nothing of this horrific attack. Why? They're terrified of the regime. The regime never investigated this murder. They never arrested anyone. They never talked about it. I heard about it. It was a buzz in the Jewish community in the US and New York and Southern California, but we didn't hear about it anywhere else. It's never been discussed. Again, horrific act against Jews by the regime, and silence, nothing. We hear nothing. So again, this is an example of a brutal attack. I'm just giving the viewers an idea. This is just a glimpse of these attacks on Jews and Jewish sites. The list goes on and on and on. We just don't have the time today to go through them individually. Next slide, please. So another avenue in which the regime shows its anti-Jewish beliefs is through their Sharia laws. It's through their really anti-Semitic constitution. The regime, since its inception in 1979, has enshrined radical Islamic laws in their constitution, in their criminal and civil laws. They've created this legal situation in which non-Muslims, which Jews and Christians, Zoroastrians, are considered recognized infidels. They have some minor rights, but they're really inferior to Muslims, and I should say Shiite Muslims for that sake. Sunni Muslims are a degree below Shiites in Iran, but the non-Shiite Muslims, the Jews, the Zoroastrians, and the Christians are the recognized infidels. They have limited rights, but inequality under the law. The unrecognized infidels are the Baha'is. They are the polytheists. They are the Buddhists. They are the Hindus. Not that many in Iran, but the Baha'is are treated worse than the Jews. Now, some of these examples of the Iranian constitution being anti-Jewish or anti-non-Shiite Muslim, look at Article 1, for example. It limits the rights of non-Muslims. It limits their some of their abilities under the civil code to bring judgments against Muslims. They have very limited rights. They have very limited recourse when they have issues that come up with their legal issues that come up with in business and affairs of the state. Article 4, these are the laws in which they're Sharia laws, which are really discriminatory against Jews and other non-Muslims. Article 12, Islam is set to be the official Shiite Islam is said to be the official laws of the official religion of Iran, and there's inferiority of all the other religions. This is enshrined in that article. Aside from the Constitution, you have scores of criminal and civil penalties that are very harsh against Jews and non-Shiite Muslims. For example, you have laws of retribution. If you, for example, you have an act of murder or a killing that's occurred from a Muslim onto a non-Muslim. Well, what are the penalties? They're called blood values. So if, for example, you have a Shiite Muslim under the Iranian regime's criminal laws who kills intentionally or unintentionally a non-Muslim, a Jew, his penalty would be perhaps a criminal, perhaps a financial fine. The life of a Jew is 1/8 or 1/12 the value of a Muslim. So that financial penalty is determined by the courts. You have many civil laws that are really biased against non-Muslims, such as Jews. For example, a Jew cannot testify against a Muslim, a Shiite Muslim, in an Iranian regime's court. Why? Because the court deems non-Muslims as lacking righteousness. They are najas. They are religiously impure. The inheritance laws, for example, in Iran, you could say you have, for example, parents that are both Jewish, and they have 3 children that are Jewish. If one of the children converts to Islam, Shiite Islam, goes before the court and says, my parents have passed away, the entire inheritance by Iranian regime law goes to that child that is converted to Shiite Islam. The Jewish children will receive nothing. Again, these are examples of how the regime is really biased against Jews and non-Shiite Muslims on a daily basis. Non-Muslims are never given, such as Jews, they're never given an advantage under the Iranian regime's Shiite laws over Muslims in any setting, business, state, in any affairs. A very important note before we move on is judges. Judges in Iran, the legal court judges are given the authority to deem any case or any law which they personally view as harmful to Muslims and beneficial to non-Muslims. They can do whatever they want if they personally deem it as a disadvantage to the Muslim. So again, the laws are really ridiculous and examples of really the anti-Jewish belief of the regime. Next slide. Perhaps my biggest example of the anti-Jewish belief of the regime is by pointing out some of the anti-Jewish books, some of the anti-Jewish television programs and online media outlets, messages that they put out. The biggest is perhaps the biggest propagator of the regime's anti-Jewish message in the Persian language media and also in the regime's English language media is the IRIB. It's the regime's official state-controlled media outlet. It's the equivalent of the BBC for the Iranian regime. And they've put out over the past 2 decades scores of television miniseries that have ridiculously disgusting anti-Jewish themes and messages. For example, in the lower left is a photograph of this Jewish rabbi, a Jewish priest, from this mini series. It was called Saint Mary. It was about the life of Christ's mother, Mary. And this Jewish priest was seen in this, very negative, evil way, irrational, someone that was attacking Mary, that was attacking Christianity, someone that was bloodthirsty. They had another series of television programs. They actually translated this program. It was called Conspiracy. It was originally an Arabic program that was aired in Syria and the Arab world. It was called Conspiracy, and it was based on that famous anti-Semitic book from Russia from the 1800s. I'm sure everyone's aware of it, The Protocols of the Elders of Zion. And that whole miniseries had tons of Jewish conspiracy theories, and the world wars were started by the Jews, and the Jews controlled the Ottoman Empire, and the Jews used blood to make their matzah. Really ridiculous miniseries. Another miniseries from 2012. You can see a snapshot of it in the center, the lower center. These are Hasidic men that were depicted in this miniseries. It was called The Saturday Hunter, and it was based in Israel. And they have these, not Israelis. They're not shown as quote unquote Israelis. They're shown as Hasidic Jews with the payas and the black hats. And you have these really vile characters that the regime has put out, portraying Jews as bloodthirsty and wanting to kill innocent Palestinians and innocent children, and corrupt the minds of young Jews to kill and murder. Really, really outrageous. The top left is the gentleman I'd mentioned previously. I'm sorry, the top right, Abdullah Shabazi. Again, another gentleman in academia. It's put out tons of articles that are anti-Jewish, full of Jewish conspiracy theories of Jews controlling the world, advancing Holocaust denial, just real vile, disgusting garbage. And then the Iranian regime's media outlets. You got Mashreq News, you have Tanzim News, Press TV. It's another Iranian regime media outlet that's in English language. On your top left is actually a real vile anti-Jewish comedian by the name of Akbar Abdi. And in many cases, he parades on Iranian TV, making fun of the Jews, making anti-Semitic comments, claiming the Holocaust was a joke, conspiracy theory. So throughout the regime's state-owned media, you see anti-Jewish messages, conspiracy theories, really disgusting activity coming through from their own media outlets. If this isn't hatred of the Jews from the regime, I don't know what is. Next slide, please. So another example of the regime's anti-Jewish belief and activity really comes from the regime's leadership. They have public incitement of hatred for the Jews. In the center, the top center, you have the most obvious example is the Iranian regime's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei. Obviously, many times, countless times, he's called for the annihilation of Israel. I'm sorry, but that's not just some magical button that, Israel will be destroyed. He's basically calling for the genocide of the Jews. He wants a second Holocaust of the Jews. When he says death to Israel, we're going to destroy Israel, we're going to drop bombs on Tel Aviv and Haifa, he's talking about genocide against the Jews, and he's inciting people to kill Jews. Another example, the gentleman on the top left, a cleric by the name of Mehdi Taheb. He's the head of an organization called Besat Institute for Strategic Studies. And this guy is one of those proud Jew haters in Iran. He claims that anti-Semitism has occurred in Iran and in the world because of the Jews. The Jews brought it on to themselves. They are manipulators of finance in the world. They have corrupted the world's political institutions. They have brought this on themselves, and many occasions, you can look at the videos, they're available. The organization Memory translates many of them. He's come out on many occasions and said the Jews are our greatest enemies. He doesn't hide behind the regime's typical Zionist comments. He comes out and proudly proclaims his Jew hatred. Directly below him, another cleric, a professor, his name is Vayolahi Naripurfar. He's come out many occasions and said the Jews are sorcerers. They use black magic to spy on the world. They use genies to manipulate the US and Western leaders with black magic. All kinds of really ridiculous, outrageous comments. To the left of him, another Ayatollah recently, just August of last year, this is Ayatollah Ali Reza Abadi. He said, quote, the Jews are the biggest problem for Islam and humanity. And that video is available. It's translated by Memory. Anyone can go online and see this. Again and again, you see this incitement of Jew hatred and killing Jews from the regime's leaders and clerics. So you can't tell me that Iran is a place that loves Jews. This regime is not a place, is not a government that supports Jews or cares for Jews or is benevolent for them when their own leaders are inciting Jew hatred. Next slide, please. Another example that I point to when many folks claim that the Jews are protected in Iran, there's no anti-Semitism in Iran, a Holocaust denial. This is pretty evident. You have everything from, the 2006 International Holocaust Review Global Vision of Conference, International Conference to review the global vision of Holocaust. They had an international conference, the regime. They brought all the Holocaust deniers from around the world to come and refute the Holocaust. 6 million, they claimed 6 million Jews were not killed. This is truly another level of absurd Jew hatred. And it's being pushed by the regime. This isn't some random organization in Iran that's putting this conference, that put together this conference for Holocaust denial. This was paid for, advertised, organized by the regime itself. 2005, and throughout his presidency, the former Iranian president, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, said the Holocaust is a lie. It's used as this excuse for the existence of Israel. In the center, you have social media postings from the Iranian regime's leader, Khamenei. The Zionists are just like the Nazis. This is actually a photo of Roger Garidi. Garidi is died, but he was a famous Holocaust denier in France. He was fined in France for Holocaust denial, many thousands of dollars. The regime paid for his legal fees. They paid his penalty. They praised him through social media. They brought him to Iran. They paraded him. They lifted him up on their shoulders. They had him on the media. Even after he died, Khamenei continued to praise him, publish his book in Farsi language. We all know the 2006 and also the 2015 Holocaust cartoon competitions that the regime supported and advanced. They proudly proclaimed their Holocaust denial in these vile, disgusting cartoon competitions, again, welcoming Jew haters from around the world to create cartoons that deny the Holocaust, claim the Holocaust was a joke. In the top left is actually a snapshot of a book. It's called The Holocaust Behind the Curtains, and it's put out by the regime's Political Studies and Research Institute. It's in Persian language, but it's been translated to other languages, full of conspiracy theories of how, 6 million Jews were not killed, the Jews were not gassed, supposedly. Really outrageous comments claiming that, the Holocaust is a conspiracy theory created by the Israelis and created by the Jews to create sympathy in the world and sympathy for creating the state of Israel. We went to the next slide, so we'll stay here. Another category that I like to point to when folks tell me that the Jews have been treated well in Iran is to just look at the list. Look at the list of the Jews that have been executed or killed by the regime in the past 43 years. This is just a small list of these individuals that, these Jews that were executed or killed officially or unofficially by the regime. The most prominent is Habib Iranian. He is the gentleman featured in the top center with the blue tie on, and he's slightly bald. He was the leader of the Jewish community in 1979. He was arrested on false charges of supposedly spying for Israel and the United States, not given any kind of fair trial, not given any kind of defense representation. He had a sham 20-minute trial, kangaroo court, in front of the media, Iranian state-run media, who they threw these outrageous claims that he was spying for Israel and the US. And in May of 1979, he was put in front of a firing squad and executed. His execution sparked this massive wave of Jews fleeing Iran. Every time the regime executed another Jew, thousands fled the country. Nobody ever talks about that. These quote unquote Jewish leaders that say that the Jews are treated well in Iran, that the regime loves the Jews and protects the Jews, they never talk about these Jews that the regime executed or killed or held in prison and who died in prison. Another individual directly below Iranian in your lower center, gentleman by the name of Albert Daniel. He wasn't even political. He wasn't a Jewish community leader. He was just a wealthy Jewish businessman, a philanthropist. He was arrested, he was beaten, and shot, executed with a bullet to the temple. To his right, the gentleman in that wearing that bow tie, another innocent individual. My distant relative, gentleman by the name of Ibrahim Beruchi, not political, 30-year-old businessman, Jewish businessman, owner of a major hotel. His family owned a major hotel in Tehran, arrested for no reason, beaten, tortured, shot directly in the heart, July of 1980. Why isn't anyone talking about these Jews that the regime has executed? They always claim that the Jews are treated well, why don't you ever talk about these Jews that were randomly executed, not given a trial, tortured, imprisoned, killed? It's outrageous. It's really, really outrageous. No one has ever apologized. No one in the regime has ever apologized for executing these Jews. And the Jewish community leaders never talk about them. Whenever you have these Western media outlets that come to Iran and do stories about the Jews of Iran, they never talk about El-Ghanian. They never talk about Danielpur or Beruchim or Kedushim or all these other Jews that were killed or executed by the regime. So this speaks volumes of, the regime's record and how they've treated the Jews over the past 40 years plus. Next slide. I like to point to the Jewish community, Iranian Jewish community in America, as to the status of the Jews in Iran. And what I say to individuals who ask me, what's the situation of the Jews in Iran? How are they really living? And what I say to them is, go and ask the Iranian Jewish leadership. Go ask the Iranian Jewish activists in New York and Los Angeles and Southern California. What do they say to me as an Iranian Jewish reporter? Karmel, watch what you're writing about the regime. Our community is in danger. They're in harm's way. You don't want to make the regime angry. Why would these Jewish community leaders in New York, these Iranian Jewish community leaders in New York and Los Angeles and Southern California, folks like the chief rabbi of the Iranian Jewish community in the US, a gentleman it's featured in the top left-hand corner, Rav David Shofet, who I have immense respect for. On many occasions, he said to me, look, our brothers and sisters in Iran, our Jewish brothers and sisters in Iran are living in a precarious situation. Watch what you're writing. Watch what you're writing about the regime. Why would they say that to me if everything was so fine and dandy, if everything was so rosy? Another gentleman in the Iranian Jewish community, a leader directly below him, Sam Kermanian, good friend of mine. I respect him tremendously. Many occasions he said to me, look, the Jews of Iran, they're living in a precarious situation. We need to tread carefully when we talk about the regime, when we talk about the situation of the Jews in Iran. Again, why would these Jewish leaders of the Iranian Jewish community in the US make these comments to me if everything was fine and dandy with the Jewish community in Iran? Obviously, things aren't safe. Obviously, things aren't fine and dandy for them if these folks are concerned. Next slide. I'd like to end with the numbers. The numbers don't lie. Just look at how many Jews are left in Iran. In 1979, you had 80,000 plus Jews living in Iran. You had the largest Jewish community, Mizrahi Jewish community in the world living in Iran. Vibrant, active in all the major cities, 80,000 strong. What are their numbers today? 5,000 to 8,000. The numbers don't lie, and the numbers are going down. You don't hear about it, but the American Jewish organization by the name of Payoffs every year quietly helps those Jews that leave Iran via the European countries to leave Iran and relocate to the US or Israel or Europe. So if Iran is such a fine and dandy place, if they love the Jews so much, if they're so benevolent to the Jews, then why have the numbers dwindled so dramatically? I shouldn't be living in the United States if everything's so fine and dandy. my community of 40 to 45,000 Jews in Southern California should be in Iran right now. If Iran is such a great place, if the regime has created such a safe place for the Jews. So people talk with their feet, and we can see from the numbers of the Iranian Jews that live in the US, Europe, and Israel that Iran is not a safe place for them. Otherwise, they would be living there right now. And that this is a very, very important thing that the regime and the regime's apologists and the Iranian Jewish leaders in Iran don't talk about, because it's a major embarrassment. It shows that Iran isn't the safe place, isn't the safe haven, a benevolent place for the Jews after all. And that's it. Thank you so much, Harif. Thank you, Lynn. Thanks to folks that tuned in for the lecture, and I open the floor to questions.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Karmel. That was a very comprehensive and very clear overview of the situation of the Jews in Iran today. Actually, my question, if I can just kick off, would be, what do you think would happen if there was a strike on the nuclear, on Iran's nuclear plants? What sort of scenario do you envisage for the Jews there?
I obviously don't want to make any comments that would, jeopardize their lives. As a reporter, I try to, be really careful of what I say, because obviously, their lives are in jeopardy. But they're living as hostages. They're not living in a safe situation. They may not realize it, but they're living in a very dangerous situation where at any time the regime could very easily arrest them, hold them as hostages. I don't know. The scenarios are really scary to think about. I don't want to really get into it, but it's not a safe situation for them.
Mm-hmm. You do hear of Jews traveling, though, don't you? I mean, and they return to Iran? I mean, you even hear of...
Yeah, there are a number of Jews Iranian Jews that still travel back and forth to Iran. They have Iranian passports. They have Iranian citizenship. It's dangerous. I'll have to be honest with you. They're rolling the dice. At any moment, they could be arrested. They could be arrested by the authorities, thrown in jail, held for ransom. It's not a safe situation. Whether you're an Iranian Jew or any other kind of Jew, going to Iran is dangerous. Do not do it. There is no way that anyone can help you. The Western countries can't help you. You have non-Jews that are being held and imprisoned in Iran, right now, and the Europeans and the Americans can't even help their own citizens, let alone the Jews. So they're playing Russian roulette. They're really risking it. They think that, they can bribe their way out of the country. They can, come in and out under the radar. But at any moment, they could be arrested. They could be imprisoned. They could be tortured. They could have their money taken away, their assets taken away. It's a risk. It's a real risk. In my opinion, it's a stupid risk. So, to each his own.
Right, yeah, and actually that was the question that Neil Cohen posed: can the Jews travel? I think there was another question about Israel, and does Israel help get Jews out, those Jews that want to come to Israel?
I believe there is. I believe the Jewish Agency works with organizations such as Payoffs to quietly help relocate some of those Jews that are in Europe. They've left Iran. They're in transition apartments and transition locations in Europe, in Vienna, Austria, and other places in Europe. I believe the Jewish Agency is working with Payoffs and other organizations to help them relocate and make that Aliyah transition I don't really know the specifics, so I'm not going to get into it.
Question from Sasha. To what extent were the Jews that were killed purely for economic reasons, that is to appropriate their property, and to what extent were they political or other motives for the regime to kill them?
Well, the vast majority was for economic reasons. I think the exception is Iranian, and maybe a few others that may have been entangled with folks that were in the political realm. The majority of them were executed for monetary reasons, financial reasons, to get their properties, get their businesses, get their cash, get their assets. Or many times they would execute a Jew. For example, Albert Danielpour, a very wealthy Jew. When they executed him, they not just only confiscated his multi-million dollars in assets and properties and businesses, but his execution resulted in frightening thousands of Jews from just leaving their homes, leaving their businesses in Iran, and just leaving the country overnight with nothing. And that was beneficial to the regime indirectly. So killing Jews benefited them economically because many people just dropped their assets, and the regime directly or through its officials or business folks that were connected to the regime were able to confiscate those assets that were left by the Jews, the businesses that were left by the Jews, and just appropriate them for themselves. So it was mostly economic, but I'm sure there are cases of political activity that resulted in their arrests and executions. But the political is really in the minority.
And there is a question from Dori about the leaders and rabbis of Iran. Do you think these would want to leave but cannot? And we heard about, was it the rabbi who was interviewed by Ami magazine, who I think studied in Jerusalem, didn't he? And then he went back to...
He studied in Baltimore.
Oh, in Baltimore.
Maryland, yes.
So he could have...
I'm not sure I understand the question. What?
Yeah, I think he says, he asks, do these leaders, would they want to leave, but they can't leave?
The leaders or the individuals?
Well,
the Iranian Jews can leave as long as they don't make a fuss. I think they can very quietly leave the country or flee the country illegally or legally flee, leave the country. The leaders, I don't think, leave because there needs to be someone there to toe the regime's line. There needs to be someone that speaks for the community that's remained there. The rabbi that I discussed, Yehuda Geremi, which I have immense respect for, when he came here to the U.S. several months ago, he spoke about really being a shepherd for the community, providing halakha and Jewish law and Jewish traditions and religious dogma to the community and educating Jews in Iran, keeping that aspect of Jewish life alive for them. So the leaders aren't going to leave. The individuals may.
Isabel Mergui, she raised her hand, but can you actually type in your question in the chat? Because there are still quite a few people on the call. Thank you for that. Any more questions? Yes, I mean, talking about those who were executed, Sima Rod says that Shevat Muslims were also executed for their assets in huge numbers. As you say, Muslims...
Oh, absolutely. Yes. All opponents of the regime they've been executed. You have Muslims, Shiite Muslims, you have Sunni Muslims, you have Zoroastrians, you have Christians, you have Baha'is. Scores and scores of people have been executed by the regime for political reasons, for social reasons, for economic reasons. This regime hasn't had mercy on anyone. Our letter here is just about the Jews.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
In no way do I want to discount, the violence and the evil that the regime has perpetrated against other Iranian groups.
Right, and there's a question here from Gilda. Do you have any contact with the Simon Wiesenthal Center, and why don't they pitch in? I suppose the question is, those Jewish groups that are fighting anti-Semitism, why don't they say anything about the way the Jews are treated? Or do they think that they'll only make the situation worse for them if they speak out?
It's a major problem. It's a major problem, and a big part of it has to do with the Iranian Jewish community's leadership here in the United States. You have roughly 40 to 45,000 Iranian Jews living in Southern California, and 20 to 25,000 Iranian Jews living in New York. And right now, their leadership, unfortunately, in my personal opinion, are frightened. They are still living in that 1979 mode of, we don't want to rock the boat with the regime. We're afraid of, if we say something, it'll make the situation worse. But what they don't understand is the regime is frightened. They're terrified of activists and any group or journalists speaking out and exposing their anti-Semitism. Unfortunately, the Iranian Jewish community's leaders in the US are fairly quiet. They don't comment. If you look at many of my articles, I contact them. I try to get interviews and comments from them. They don't return my comments, or they say no comment because they're afraid. So when you have the larger American Jewish community looks at the Iranian Jewish community, the Iranian Jewish community's leaders, and sees that they're quiet and hears from them that you shouldn't say anything, keep it under the, sweep it under the rug, you're going to make the situation worse. They're not going to say anything. The Wiesenthal Center, yes, I am in contact with them. They're one of those few organizations in the US that doesn't have fear of the regime. They call out the regime's Holocaust denial. They call out the regime's anti-Semitism. Another organization is the ADL. There are Jewish organizations, American Jewish organizations that call out the regime's anti-Semitism and anti-Jewish activities and rhetoric. It's just very limited sometimes, and they're taking their cue from the Iranian Jewish leaders in the US and kind of trying to keep it under, the down low, trying to keep it low and quiet. It's unfortunate. I don't agree with it in any way.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. William made a comment to say, Ami magazine, we're only really interested in the religiosity of Jews. They're not really interested in the political situation. Would you agree with that?
I really don't want to get into rehash what they did. My op-ed is available online. Everyone can take a look at it. I just think it was very irresponsible journalism. That coverage indirectly benefited the regime. It's inaccurate. It's an inaccurate depiction of the life of Jews and the situation of Jews in Iran. It's very irresponsible journalism. For me as a reporter, accuracy is important. I'm not here to do propaganda. I'm here to report the facts. And what they published is factually inaccurate. And it doesn't benefit the Jews of Iran. It doesn't benefit Jews anywhere. And my views, my comments are available online, my op-eds there, people can read about it. I'm really not going to get into that magazine's numbers are very difficult to determine because the regime they don't have a census. They never make a census of non-Muslims, let alone Muslims. You have many underground churches, you have many crypto Christians, Muslims that have left the faith and they've become Christians. They have house churches. They're basically living, every day in fear because the crime of apostasy, leaving Islam for Christianity or another faith, is execution, imprisonment. So they're really in danger. They take risks for following Christianity. There's a sizable Iranian, Assyrian, Iranian, Armenian community in Iran that are Christians. They openly live as Christians. So it's really hard to determine what the numbers are because you have so many people that they've converted to Christianity, but very quietly and under the radar.
Yeah, sort of Christian Marranos, if you like. Yes. And I think we'll make this the last question, and that really is an important question. It's from Miriam. Can Iranian Jews outside Iran reclaim their land and property that they left behind? Do you know of any efforts in that?
Yeah, there are some. There are some that have gone back in the last 4 decades, and with difficulty by bribing folks, by using their contacts in the local and national government, been able to get some of their wealth. I'm not going to get into the details of it. It has been done. Some of the folks that have gone back to retrieve their assets and properties have been arrested. All their assets have been confiscated. They've been held in prison. Their relatives in the US and Europe have had to pay outrageous ransoms to get them out. So they've not been able to reclaim their assets when they went there. It's a hodgepodge. It's a disaster. But those folks are really in the minority. The majority of Iranian Jews have not gone back to reclaim their assets. They're smart. They know that they're going to get arrested, and even if they are able to reclaim, their assets and get any kind of money, the authorities would be after them. The regime's thugs would shake them down for money in exchange to be able to leave the country. The majority of them they've left their businesses and assets, not been able to reclaim them.
Mm-hmm. And there are no legal avenues, presumably, to
No.
Okay, well, I think on that rather pessimistic note, we will end there. Thank you so much, Karmel.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. I think what we will, before we open up to anybody who wants to say anything, I will just tell everybody about the next event, which is in 2 weeks' time on the 1st of February, and that will be about the Jews of Yemen. And another thing that I think I ought to tell you about, and we have a project to get grandparents and grandchildren together. We would like grandchildren to interview their grandparents and find out about their lives in Arab or Muslim countries. So I'm looking for volunteers. Harif is looking for anybody to step forward, volunteer their grandchildren, and then we can video the interviews and perhaps collect some interesting stories that way and engage the youth, which is of course very important. And anybody who's interested, please do email us at info@harif.org. And thank you all very much for joining us. Please stay safe, please stay well. and hope to see you next time. So as is our custom, we will now unmute everybody so you can say goodbye or whatever to
Okay,
Karmel.
stop the live stream, stop the recording button. This recording button, pause, stop.